mechanisms of action, right?
He was, and I asked him, I said, are you concerned that you're using 3 PPOs, you know, and then, you know, looking at what he's planting next year, you know, he's using Reflex again.
Yeah.
You know, and so, yeah, so we just kind of had that conversation about potential for PPO resistance.
You know, we have been talking about that for the last couple of years to our growers, and we've generated a fair amount of awareness. The catch is that I don't have real good alternatives. So, you know, in the case of your soybean guy, I don't want to overload the PPOs. Well, what, if he's got Palmer, what's he going to put out?
Well, we talked about using our product Tailwind, which would be metribuzin and metolachlor, with pairs on behind the press, just to kind of interrupt the 2 PPOs.
Good if you're a brave man.
Well, we also talked about
you have to be brave.
Well, we also
injury.
Talked about
Herbicide damage.
Injury.
The tolerant varieties. We discussed about
Yeah.
you know, the soybean varieties that were more tolerant to metribuzin.
Yeah. The problem with metribuzin is this rate's just right, and a fraction more is too much. And we got a lot of variable soils, and so this end of the field is just right, and I go over that hill and I may kill soybeans. So.
But speaking of that, I think something that I've really observed and thought of is in our industry, visual injury has been taboo. I mean, it has kept us from doing some things that probably is not so bad. But because of the level of acceptance of visible injury, we have strayed away from things. But this is a bigger problem to me than visual injury. My question is there been enough work done, or have we looked at enough of things like you just described to see what is the economic impact on that visual injury versus, you know, taking a risk of continuous use of PPOs, or, you know, and we have that scenario in cotton. We have it in, I'll be quite honest with you, our organization, our company has some global products that are being used today where visual injury is accepted better, and it's you know, it's just I guess perceived a lot better. And so we don't even look at those chemistries and bringing them here just from the fact of, okay, you're going to see something ugly, but the impact economically is not really there. And I think we're limiting ourselves because of it.
We have gone from where we were accustomed to a fair amount of injury to where it's no longer acceptable, and now we're kind of going back the other way, but boy, I whine and complain when I see an injury anymore.
Yeah.
But we're going to have to accept it. You know, we used to spray, I don't know if y'all grew any soybeans in Australia, but aceflurfin was one of the PPO inhibitors. Blazer was our trade name. Used to burn soybeans almost off. Well, that's just the way it was. People accepted it. They don't accept it anymore, but we're going to have to go back to accepting some injury. Anyway, what makes this Palmer amaranth such a bad weed? And to my knowledge, y'all don't have it in Australia. We can send you a few seed back if you want them. This thing is a native of the desert, and so it's very heat and drought tolerant, extremely efficient physiologically. Very fast growth, very big growth. You can tell that's a guy, that ain't me. I've been accused of it, but that ain't me. You can tell a guy standing there on a 30-gallon Roundup jug, and he still ain't as tall as the weed is. Extremely prolific. I'll show you some numbers in a minute. We know that the resistance trait is transferred into pollen. This thing has separate male and female plants, so you got to have outcrossing. Don't know how far that pollen goes, but Culpepper did some work. It went 300 meters, no problem. And so I got one here, or my neighbor has one here, and across the road I got some Palmer, but they're not resistant, but here comes his pollen, and I very quickly can get resistance. Let me back it. I mentioned that this thing grows very quickly. It likes it nice and hot. It literally can grow, what is that, 5-10 centimeters for y'all? It can literally grow 2 inches a day once it gets cranking. And so makes management difficult to be timely. You can tell there's another picture, very big. There's a coin up against the base of the plant. You can tell the populations that we get into. So just a tremendously competitive weed. I mentioned that the seed bank management, more and more people are convinced that's the only way we're going to deal with resistance is to get a handle on the seed bank. And you can do a little playing with numbers. Let's assume that we start with one resistant female, and we make some very conservative assumptions. The point of this thing is you can start with one plant that's resistant and you don't control it. 3 years later, you got 1 trillion seed per acre. You know, you're going backwards fast like that. Steve, how many folks do you see in your territory that's got Palmer amaranth that thick?
I drive on by those fellas.
Okay.
You can't help that guy.
You can't help it, that's right.
The point is, that is not uncommon. This thing is so prolific that it'll build up overnight almost on you. And if I'm sitting there and I got 200 plants in a place that big square and I kill 99% of them, I ain't got nowhere. I've still got a problem. And so we've got to get virtually complete control. Well, the fewer of them I got out there, the better it's going to be to get near complete control. So reducing that seed bank is a big issue. Again, pretty much everybody in the science end of the thing are now saying we've got to focus here. Some culpepper's work here, but one plant growing in a cotton field could make 450,000 seed. And for us, that's equivalent of 10 seed every square foot over an acre coming off that one plant. So you can see why it just slips up on people so quickly. A common thing we had people to say, I saw a plant or two over there last year, didn't think nothing about it. 2 years later, hell, it's all over the whole farm now. Point being, I mentioned the economic thresholds earlier, probably not much yield loss there. But if every one of those are making 10 seed per square foot for the whole acre, I'm really going backwards. So we're striving to get as few seed production as we can. Fortunately, in the case of this Palmer amaranth, those seed don't last forever. You normally think of weed seed, boy, they last 30, 40, 50 years kinds of things. This is also some of Culpepper's research here, and they went in and buried Palmer amaranth seed at different depths and go back various times later and dig them up and see how many seed were viable. And you basically tell a little bit of difference due to planting depth. Deeper lasted a little longer, but the point of it is this is months. And this is viability of the seed. And what you see is we lose viability quick. We're down to less than 20% viability after 3 years. What that basically means, if I can get a good handle on the control and I don't keep making seed, I'm going to eventually get ahead of that thing. And you see examples of it all the time. I saw a good one yesterday, but I took this picture a few years ago, just riding down the road and seen this field. And the whole field was in soybean. And that's Palmer amaranth. And you can look across there and say, well, gee, something different there. And so I chased the guy down just to ask him some questions because I figured I want to know what he treated with up here. Turns out the whole field had been treated the same way, with Roundup. The difference was he had soybeans back here last year and he had tobacco in the front. Now, if you're a tobacco grower, that is your first, second, and third priority because that's your money crop. Soybeans fill in space. So he filled in space with soybeans there, but he took care of it here. We use herbicides and tobacco. We cultivate 2, 3, 4 times. We're going across the field doing various other things with hand labor. You pull them up as you go through the field, but you can tell the impact in 1 year between lousy control and good control. Arkansas started this thing a couple of years ago, a zero tolerance program. North Carolina jumped on the bandwagon last year, and kind of a promotional thing. We call it weed-free NC. Don't let anything go to seed, basically. One other thing that we have not got very many people to buy into yet, but I think is important. We grow a fair amount of corn, and we harvest corn for like end of August, middle to end of August. And yet we don't get a killing frost till maybe November. And so there's a lot of time in there for pigweed to develop. Now, so after a corn crop, we can make a whole lot of pigweed seed. Relatively inexpensive, relatively, we can do a fantastic job controlling it. And so common sense says we're greatly cutting back the seed bank there. All right, what kind of cotton do y'all grow? I mean, seed, what brand names?
CSD, Cotton Seed Distributors, which is the largest strain cotton breeder.
What traits are in it then?
Roundup Ready Flex.
Roundup Ready Flex.
Bollgard.
And Bollgard. You don't have any glufosinate, Liberty resistance yet?
No,
Okay.
Liberty next year, I think.
Okay. We, at one time we were 100% Roundup Ready, or Roundup Ready Flex now. The Liberty Link cottons initially didn't catch on here because they were in poor germplasm. That's changed in the last year or two. We're growing a lot of Phytogen company, Phytogen, and their traits are called Wide Strike, Roundup Ready Flex. Wide Strike is basically the Bollgard equivalent, and they carry Roundup Ready traits also.
That's Dow's, right?
It's Dow's. Phytogen owns Dow. But this Wide Strike trait here, that was the insect control trait like Bollgard, but they linked a gene that gave them tolerance to glufosinate as a marker so they could use it in breeding. And while the tolerance to glufosinate is not great, it's not complete in these Wide Strike varieties, it's good enough you can use it. And because of the pigweed issue, we've really gone to planting a lot of those. And then most recently, the Glytol Liberty Link, which is true resistant to both glyphosate and glufosinate, have come on. But what we're promoting to our growers for palmer control, regardless of what kind of cotton they're growing, most of our guys now are in some kind of a no-till or strip till, where we till up, just a little narrow strip on top of the bed. And so we have to use some kind of residual herbicide. Well, we talked about the horseweed thing earlier, and we said we need a residual to take care of what could come up later. The same thing with the palmer amaranth. We are almost entirely rain-fed cotton, very little irrigation. And so when I put a pre-emergence herbicide out and it doesn't rain for 10 days, I'm in trouble. I like to have something residual, and for us it's flumioxazin. I like to have that as part of my burn down program 2-3 weeks ahead of planting. Not only is it going to help me with things like the horseweed, but it gives me some help on the palmer in case I don't get rain. So I still got something working for me, because I put that out 2 to 3 weeks ahead of time. It's going to rain somewhere in that 2 to 3 weeks period, or it's going to be so dry I'm not going to plant anyway. So I got some help going. And we are going back using a lot more paraquat than we used to. Come planting time, I got little ones peeping up out there. If they're resistant to Roundup, I better put something else on to get them out. And then behind the planter, we're putting out some kind of residual. We got a number of choices there. The big ones in the last couple of years around here have been Diuron, Direx, combinations of Direx, Fomesafen, Rumble, Reflex, whatever. Reflex and Warrant, which is an encapsulated acetochlor. Those have been the big two that have really focused in hard on the palmer.
Have you seen a reduction in flumeteron, or are you still recommending it?
We still recommend it. And
So it's effective on it?
it's effective. I don't know what y'all have access to for the pre's, but this is the way I would rank the ones that we use. Best would be flumioxazin, the Valor, and the Fomesafen. I consider them the best. The next group down is flumeturon and Diuron. And the bottom of the heap is Prometrine, Caparol, Cotton Pros, and Prowl as a pre. Prowl Incorporated is pretty good, but Prowl on top, the pendimethalin on top of the ground, awfully inconsistent. And so the flumeturon is pretty good, but I think things like Fomesafen and